broadcast of A Mirror Darkly. This is a revival of sorts. We're returning to a thing that we did many, many years ago, specifically in 1999, called Beyond the Box, when we had access to a studio at QNet in Palmdale. They allowed us to use their facilities. We did a radio internet broadcast, and it was very flaky because the technology was not quite up to what we were trying to do.
Yep. And we used ICQ for the social media.
Yep.
And for people to be able to message us in that. I think we used AOL's Instant Messenger as well.
So too, and
ICQ seemed to be better.
Plus, we also had an 800 number that people
Yes, we did.
on.
We do not have that.
We do not have an 800 number.
No. And who calls them anyway?
Yeah. So now you can contact us through Messenger since this is live on Facebook.
Or leave comments on the posts that we've put up on the share for the group.
Yeah, the group page is A Mirror Darkly, and it is live now. It's a public group now. So you can always get that. We also have a YouTube channel, and eventually this particular broadcast will end up there once we edit it. Essentially, all the editing that we'll do will be adding the opening and trailing credits. Okay. In the past, with Beyond the Box, we did topics such as sin and salvation, how to read the Bible.
Introduce everybody.
Oh, yeah, it might be a good idea. Go ahead, introduce yourself.
Okay, so obviously this is Robin, and this is kind of his brainchild. And
Rick Curtis was the one that...
Okay, Rick Curtis started the Beyond the Box, and hopefully he'll be listening eventually. And then this is JP Spohr, and he is a member of our church.
Hello.
And why don't you tell him a little bit about yourself?
Gosh, what about myself? Sure.
Well,
Anything
you
you
like
want.
role-playing games.
Yeah. Okay.
Something
Well,
cool about you.
I'm
Science fiction, fantasy.
I'm a writer. I have a novel that I'm in the middle of editing. The slow and painful and soul-sucking process of editing.
Rewriting sucks.
Robin knows nothing about that.
I'm also a huge fan of board games, role-playing games, and miniature war games, and I'm actually writing my own role-playing game right now called Shadows of the Red Sun. And and I'm going to be approaching a lot of this. What we talked about, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm bipolar, and some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about will be from the perspective of somebody who has a moderate to severe mental illness.
Yeah.
So,
One of the topics we discussed eventually.
Yes. And I'm Ruth. I'm Robin's wife, and I teach third grade. And I'm actually handling the social media for this. So if you are messaging, I'll be interjecting messages because the computer that we're using is kind of far away from us, and we're too old to see that far. At least Robin and I are. JP's not as old as we are. too old to see that far away, that small print. So I got my phone. There it is.
There it is.
I've got my phone, and I'm watching for any comments and things like that. So as people join us and start interjecting comments, I'll jump in. Unless I have something brilliant to say, I probably won't say much. So, which means I'll probably not say much.
And eventually our setup will get more sophisticated, but this is the best we can do right now.
Yep.
So today's topic is the importance of questions. And one of the things that frustrates me a lot of times when I am teaching a class, I'll start the class and I'll ask students, do you have any questions? Or I'll ask during the middle of the class, do you have any questions? And I just hear crickets coming back. And this gets me thinking as to why it is sometimes hard for us to have people ask questions? What is the difficulty of asking questions? Is it just that people can't think of any questions on the spur of the moment? They freeze, kind of like deer in headlights, and they can't come up with something? Are people afraid of looking stupid with the questions they ask? Have people in the past been shut down for asking questions? I know that's one of the things that I see periodically with people that have become atheists. That they grew up in the church, they had a question, and the pastor, the priest, made fun of them or told them they shouldn't have this sort of question. It's akin to something that St. Augustine wrote in his Confessions, and it gets misquoted a lot of times.
Whoops. Sorry.
What are you doing?
I found where I can see the comments, but it's making noise. Okay, let me shut it down. Sorry, my bad. Rookie mistake.
Yep, we'll figure this out. This is why if we weren't going live, we would have time to edit these things out.
But we want people to interact.
Yes, we do. So not a whole lot of editing will happen. Anyway, in Book 11, Section 14 of the Confession, St. Augustine tells this story. He says, so here's how I answer someone saying, what was God doing before he made the sky and the earth? I don't answer the way a certain person is reported to have done, by dodging this aggressive question with a joke. He was preparing hell for people that ask questions like that. Potshot is what insight is not. That's why I don't give that answer, but would prefer this one. I don't know what I don't know. That's better than saying what results in laughter at somebody asking a deep question. And that's the problem. That is, what happens is that a lot of times these youth pastors or priests, they probably don't know the answer. And so rather than just saying, I don't know, they attack the person that's asked the uncomfortable question that they can't answer.
I've taught a number of years in middle school before doing the writing thing, and you see that a lot. That dynamic a lot with 12 and 13-year-olds as well. You'll ask for questions, and you say, "Does anybody have any questions about what we just talked about?" And just silence. And then there's that one kid who kind of looks around and puts their hand up, and they're afraid. I mean, sometimes they're terrified to ask something that they're curious about. And the reason is very often because the other students tease them, sometimes mercilessly, for participating in class. And what I've discovered is the kids who are doing the teasing are generally the ones who feel the least comfortable in the class. And instead of allowing themselves to ask the questions and feel more comfortable and become part of the class, they shut down, ridicule, and attack the ones who really don't have that hang up. And so you end up with, like you said, crickets.
And of course, people are sometimes afraid of what the answer to a question might be too, I think. People don't want to probe too deeply into something because they don't know if they really want to know the answer for sure. But I found personally that questions are really the only way that you can ever find out the truth of something. One of the mistakes that people make in thinking about theology is they think it's a list of already answered questions. And really, theology is primarily asking questions, because there's more that we don't know about everything than what we do know. I tell students that you know that your education has been successful if, when you're finished, you realize that you know nothing. Socrates was praised by the Oracle of Delphi for knowing that he didn't know anything.
Someone's at our front door.
Yes, they are. It's probably the tripod being delivered.
Oh, the one we could be using?
One that we could be using that we could put a cell phone on because it's got the little connector to a cell phone, so we can use that as a camera. But
Okay.
yeah, it came today.
Oh, no, my
I did
phone wants to
not
do a
arrive
software.
early, so.
I got a new phone today, and so it wants to do a software update. Hopefully, it doesn't want to reboot.
Well, don't do a software update now.
Well, it's doing it.
Oh, you can't put it off?
Well, it's not giving me that option.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Oh,
Rick Curtis has joined us. Hi, Rick.
hi, Rick.
Hi, whoever you are.
He was one of the original hosts of
Beyond the Box.
Beyond the Box.
The reason
and
why
he
this
started it.
and the reason why this isn't called Beyond the Box is because we did this in 1999, and since then, and we only did it for about 6 months, and since then, other people have glommed onto that title. So we thought we'd have to come up with something
Rick says, "Hey."
new. So that's what we've done, something different. The questions open us up to new ideas to make us realize what we thought was wrong. And of course, people are afraid of having their fundamental concepts of life, the universe, and everything challenged.
Well, I find that's generally because they don't know why they believe it.
Well, this is true. I mean, it's actually through a student's question that I had ended up altering what I believe on occasion. It is, I'll be teaching along, doing something and presenting something, and then they'll ask about the implications of that in a way that I hadn't thought of before, and I realized I've got to shift my perspective as a consequence. For instance, years ago, I was teaching at a certain institution, and I was talking about the structure of the creation account, how the 6 days are arranged thematically, not chronologically. That is, the first 3 days you have essentially stages being created, and on the last 3 days you have those stages being populated by the actors. And the student asked me, well, what are the implications of that then for chronological understanding of the Genesis account? And of course, I realized that I threw it out the window. And so that forced a reevaluation of what in the world the text was actually doing at that point.
That's a really super good question.
Yes, it was a very good question. He spontaneously asked it. So I didn't have to ask, does anybody have a question? He just raised his hand and asked the question, which is nice when that happens.
Good for him.
It's remarkably rare for that to happen.
In my class, we get a dojo point for that, but we're only in 3rd grade. We don't ask deep questions.
Yeah. Well, when I was teaching
Not very often.
Yeah, when I was teaching freshmen, though, I came to you and asked how to do classroom control.
Yes.
Based on your experience teaching 3rd grade, it was remarkably effective.
Yes.
It should not have been necessary in a freshman college class, but nevertheless, that's what happened.
It's good to know I serve a purpose.
Yes, you do. So Jesus said that the truth will set you free in John chapter 8, verse 32. But yet, as Rousseau said, humanity is born free and everywhere it is in chains. So we will never run out of questions. Answers simply raise more of them. But if we care to be free, we have to be willing to ask questions, difficult questions, and not be afraid to do so or to be afraid to let them take us wherever they might take us. I think the most important thing in discourse, and of course, what the purpose of this broadcast is unbridled inquiry, which is the subtitle of this whole thing. We have to not be afraid. And we shouldn't be afraid of the truth. That is, reality is something that we should be willing to adapt ourselves to rather than to resist. And a lot of people would rather live with their happy little delusions rather than with the reality actually is.
Rick shared, questions in their purest form lead to knowledge and shared revelation. Unfortunately, rarely in contemporary culture are questions without agenda or bias. That pure question referred to as a gift.
Yeah.
And that's what I find. A lot of questions people ask are gotcha questions.
Yeah.
Especially when it pertains to politics or religion. And they're all gotcha questions.
And those aren't genuine questions then.
And those I don't like to answer. Those I don't answer generally. If I have that gotcha feeling about it, I generally don't answer those questions because they're just, it's kind of like when the Pharisees would ask Jesus questions, you know, and they were gotcha questions. But Jesus was really smart and good at stuff.
So
I, on the other hand, not so much.
Yes.
How often do you beat your wife, Robin?
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
Or when did you stop beating your wife?
Yeah,
Yeah, those kind of
question.
questions. Yeah.
Well, see, that's one of the difficulties, though, with some questions is that depending on the context of where you are, do I have time necessary to unpack this thing to answer all these questions? I was talking to one of the women in the church. He asked a question about a author, Zechariah Sitchin, who peddled. He's dead now. I think died in 2013. He peddled a lot of pseudoscience. Mm-hmm. And one of the clues that you have when you're dealing with crackpot is if they make a comment along the lines of nobody has, my book came out 10 years ago, and since then nobody has refuted me. Mm-hmm. Well, the reason nobody's refuted you is because you're a crackpot, and the amount of effort and time necessary to refute you is time I could better spend on other things.
Right.
Because for an expert, when they come across a crackpot, what they say is so obviously wrong, it's like, well, why do I have to bother refuting this?
Well, it's kind of like throwing your pearls before swine.
Yeah.
It's like you're an idiot, for lack of a better word, and I'm not going to bother with this. Well, for example, there was a question I wanted to ask this morning. There was a post on a page that I'm a member of, and it said, if you don't recognize the word, your body won't either, talking about like things that you eat.
Oh.
And so I was like, well, let's see. My body will recognize arsenic, but it won't recognize the chemical words for broccoli, which I don't happen to know off the top of my head.
All the chemicals that make up broccoli.
Right, the chemicals that make up broccoli. But my body recognizes it as broccoli and functions better, whereas it recognizes arsenic as well, and I do as well. Mm-hmm. But it reacts in a completely different way.
Yes, very poorly.
Yes, very poorly. And I know the intent of the post was basically like you should eat healthy foods and not be just eating like, a lot of processed foods and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I know that the intention was good, so I didn't pose the question, but I thought about it.
Yeah, because you can make even common things very complicated by talking about their chemical compositions. Hydrogen monoxide sounds horrible. Mm-hmm. But of course, that's just water.
Yeah, well, enough of it and you'll die.
Yes, you will.
Yes. We're having a lot of it too, and it's causing issues. Rick said, or answering a fool according to their folly. Which is from,
of course, if you go to that passage, look at the verse there in Proverbs.
I'll look it up.
Or you can look it up. And because it's two things right after the other that are contradictory on the surface. It's an interesting little passage.
Do you happen to know the verse?
It's in Proverbs.
Thank you. I'll Google it because Bible Gateway's app is not real efficient about looking up words and phrases.
Okay. There's also the danger when you answer a crackpot that you legitimize their questions.
Yeah. Exactly.
And we're talking about questions, and we want to answer them, and we want this to be unbridled inquiry. But unbridled doesn't mean
stupid.
Are
there stupid questions?
Yeah. One of the ones I'm thinking of is, if God is all powerful, could He make a square circle?
Mm-hmm. Now, what's the problem with a question like that?
It's nonsense.
Yes. Well, see, it's a rhetorical thing. It's by definition, you can't do that. It's like asking what happens when an irresistible force meets an unmovable object. Well, by definition, an irresistible force can't be resisted. by definition, an unmovable object can't be moved. You can't have both those things in the same universe.
Yeah.
And so by that, so it's a word. It's like a pun. It's not a legitimate question.
And actually, this passage that Rick mentioned actually addresses exactly what we're talking about.
Yes.
It's Proverbs 26, 4 and 5. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. Answer a fool according to his folly, or he will be wise in his own eyes. So, like you said, if you kind of legitimize what they're saying, if you respond to them, so you just ignore them.
Okay, now how do you resolve the paradox of those two verses, since they seem to be saying the opposite things? One says don't answer a fool, one says do answer a fool.
Is it like an if-then statement? Like,
well, if you read...
I know we've studied this in the past, and being
Yes.
married to you for 35 years, I should know the answer, but I think I failed the exam, so you can go ahead and clue everyone in. It's a gotcha question. I'm not going
It's
there.
not a gotcha question, but it should make
It's a
you
got me
think and
question.
wonder about it. That is, what these two verses are right next to each other.
Right.
So it's not done accidentally. It's done on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
As you read through the book of Proverbs, what do we learn about fools?
Well, if they don't learn from their mistakes.
They don't
they're
learn from their
idiots.
mistakes. You have, for instance, one of the Proverbs says, better to meet a bear robbing her cubs than to meet a fool in his folly.
Mhm.
I think to some extent the point of putting those two things together is that when you're facing a fool,
You can't win.
you can't win. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the point of that, and that's why those two things are together like that.
Right.
That is, no matter what you do, it's not going to work that well for you. Better to just avoid fools altogether. So what is the difference between good, legitimate questions versus stupid questions, or can we make that kind of distinction in questions?
Well, when I give full directions to my students and I've repeated them and I've asked if anybody has a question and nobody says anything, and I send them back to their seats and they go, what do I do? I'm like, okay, that's a stupid question because you weren't listening. But they are only third graders, so you have to have some
Well,
mercy.
journalists
You can't tell them it's a stupid question.
Yeah, journalists can be that way, though. I know
Oh, they're full of stupid questions.
well, when I was, with media relations during the X Prize,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in when they were doing the press conference after they had won the Ansari X Prize, and we had given all the members of the press a packet,
Mm-hmm.
which answered a huge number of questions for them. Did they read it? No.
No.
They asked the question. Plus, they asked the same questions over and over again.
Yes, I've noticed that.
This person stands up, asks Bertan a question. Bertan answers the question. Next journalist asks the exact same question.
Mhm.
Bertan answers it again. He does that 10 times. He's clearly getting irritated.
Right. Well, and then you always got this too. You got this horrific murder scene, and they come up to the one remaining family member, like, your entire family was just killed by a gruesome axe murderer. How do you feel about that? Well, I kind of hated them, so it's all good for me. They're rich and they left all their money to me. You might be the gruesome axe murderer, but I always hate those. Like, somebody's in like this horrible situation. It's like the worst day of their life thus far, and they're asking them, how do you feel about it? Well, you could probably infer. That's a skill, inferring.
Yeah.
So
how is it that people like that do not seem to be afraid to ask questions versus...
Because they're fools. Step right in it.
Yeah. Because you don't want to keep people from asking questions,
Right.
even if they seem stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Because how can you judge for yourself whether or not your question is actually a stupid one?
Mm-hmm.
Because it may be an obvious thing, but perhaps for this person it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the other thing to keep in mind too, like with students, is that, any kind of a lecture that's going on, people fade in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And so they may have missed a little piece of whatever it is you said.
And you're
The obvious.
afraid that you're going to ask about something that the professor just said.
Mhm.
That's why I will usually go, you probably already said this and I missed it, but can you answer this question?
Right.
I think
Because then you don't feel like an idiot.
at least one of the ways that you can tell is you proceed from motive.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the
Mhm.
motive and
So it's a gotcha question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was in law enforcement for a couple of years before I did teaching. I was a civilian employee, and so I didn't really know a whole lot of what was going on. And I would have reporters coming up and saying, you know, can you answer this? No, you have to go talk to these people. Well, can you tell me something about this? No, you have to go talk to our press department. Oh, can you answer this? And it's like their motives were very obviously trying to get a scoop that nobody else had. They were trying
that's
to.
their job.
They were trying to get information that didn't belong in the public sphere.
Yeah.
Right.
Information that could have compromised investigation.
Mhm.
And they knew that going after the cadet in the powder blue uniform,
Mhm.
that I was
That you might let something slip.
exactly.
Mhm. When I was training for the sheriff's department to be a volunteer, okay, full disclosure, I was really doing it because I found out the volunteers can drive the sheriff's cars down to LA if they're going down there for like a repair or like they need them down there for some reason. It's not a cop that's driving, it's a volunteer. And I was like, I really want to drive the cop cars. I don't need the sirens on. I just, because I like to drive stuff. So full disclosure, that's where I was working toward. I ended up not having really the time to invest though. But anyway, so, but one of the things they were teaching us in our training was there will be times when the volunteers are out there, they're like at the yellow tape area, and you're going to have people going, what's going on? Did you see what happened? You know what's going on? And there could be reporters, it could just be John Q. Public, but that even if you do know something and you did see something, you can't say anything because first of all, you don't know what's covered by privacy laws. And two, you're not an investigator or anybody like that. You don't really know what's going on. So you just need to just say you don't know and to direct them, like you said, to the people that they should be talking to.
Mm.
So
that's one way you can tell, is what's the motive, or with students. Sometimes you get a student, you can tell with the look on his face that he's got a smart ass question that he's going to be asking. And he's doing it because his buddies 2 rows over have, are going to be chuckling along with him. And, there was one atheist that I knew in college in particular who delighted in asking me questions that he didn't think I could answer. And it's the motivation behind those questions. Do we answer questions that are intended to embarrass us, put us into a bad spot, get information that we shouldn't be giving out, stuff like that, or are we answering questions for an honest seeker?
Yeah. Of course, Jesus, we have his example. He did answer questions that were posed to him with poor motivation. And so one of the difficulties as a teacher is that, over the years you may get from students that are just trying to cause problems certain questions. And so when you hear that question coming from somebody, you may automatically think, well, they're just trying to be mean, so you shut them down. The problem with having done that, though, is you may hurt someone that actually has that question as a genuine question.
And I think if they learn that you're willing to handle all questions, that it will turn the tide of, okay, this guy's legit or this girl's legit. They really will answer my questions. So let me try a real question and see how it flies. Because if you shut them down, then it's like, okay, I'm only going to answer questions I like.
Right. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You should be open to any kind of question.
And I still tell my kids what they were supposed to, but I tell them, well, apparently you weren't listening the first time. And I repeat myself.
Well, and as a teacher, I don't think we should shut down our students, but our response needs to be tailored to the motivation.
Right.
And there were times when I just asked, do you really want to know that? And I was actually surprised. A number of times they're like, no.
Yeah.
And learning to kind of like Jesus did with finding a way to answer the question in an appropriate manner, despite the bad motivation behind it, is a bit of a skill.
It is a skill.
But I think we can tell my point is, I think we can tell foolish questions based off of.
But we can even make use of foolish questions.
That's true.
For
Sometimes.
Well, I think generally speaking, I mean, if you look at the way Jesus handled things, you look at the way Socrates handled things. Both of them made use of, quote unquote, the Socratic method in their teaching. That is, and how does the Socratic method work? It's a matter of getting the other person to start questioning themselves and going through in their own minds, what is it that I'm thinking, showing that, trying to create a certain level of cognitive dissonance. And if you do it well enough, people become instructed and don't even realize you're the one that's doing the instructing. They think it's all their own idea. So as long as you're not concerned with getting the accolades, it's a nice way of doing things. So you'll see Jesus asking questions of people. That is, they'll come to him with a question, and he'll turn it around and ask them questions that lead them towards the answer that they need to have. Questions are really critically important in arriving at what is true. And again, our motivation as instructors and doing webcasts like this, whatever, should be trying to figure out what the truth is.
So does that mean then that we should engage with fools because we could
On
end
occasion,
up using their questions to lead them to the truth?
or to lead other people to the truth. That is, you can use the fool's questions to your own advantage. I mean, they're stupid, so they won't realize you're using them. But
I mean, a fool by definition is not able to change.
Yeah, they can't change.
So answer, like if it's you and a fool in a room and he's asking you foolish questions, it's kind of pointless to answer. But
Although
if it's you and a fool and
you.
somebody else, it might help that other person. Right. Yeah, it could be useful to you, but then that's when you have to decide, am I really going to answer this, or do I need to go to a different room with other people?
Well, you might try answering it enough, or ask them a question. You send them on a snipe chase if you have to.
Yeah.
A snipe hunt.
Here's a pro
but you think in terms of, coming from a Christian perspective, some of the questions are leveled to Christianity, and a lot of times it's done out of a poor motive. But it's still a useful thing to be able to do. That is, you'll have questions asked, or is the Bible written by bigots? Is it homophobic? Is it pro-slavery? Anti-women. And it's useful to engage those sorts of questions, not necessarily that it's going to have any impact on the person who has asked the question, because they may already be set in their ways and just want validation. That's the other problem that we have as human beings, is the cognitive biases that we all come with. That is, we ask questions and seek answers that will confirm what we already want to be so, rather than trying to find out what the truth actually is.
Right, which I find a lot in the media, especially the 24-hour news channels. They just want to confirm what they already believe is true. They're not really looking, like that whole investigative journalism thing is kind of a lost art, where you just go rarer, where the story leads you.
It's rarer than it should be.
Yes.
We now have journalism.
Journalism?
Yeah, it's where
churning out.
Yeah, it's where you get an idea and everybody in the media just kind of churns it around and spits out the same kind of stuff without actually doing any individual original reporting. Everybody's just kind of basing off
from each other.
Yeah. So is that your word? Or
no.
Oh, okay. You heard that from somewhere?
Yeah.
Oh, because I would love to call that a JPism, but I guess.
I'd love to call it a JPism too, so let's just do that.
Okay, we'll do that. And if somebody doesn't like that, they can tune into our show
and come up with their own special
and
words.
They can ask us how it is that we came to that conclusion.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to research. Trying to find the truth is something that people are not necessarily going to be able to do without a certain amount of training. That is, it's not a natural ability because it's contrary to our normal ways of thinking. That is, we will be very skeptical about things that challenge what we believe and very accepting of things that fit within what we already believe. And the key to doing proper research is to be as skeptical of what you believe as you are of that which challenges what you believe. One of the worst books I ever read, somebody gave it to me. And what I found in reading it was that the person had not done even the most basic sorts of research. If you look at the bibliography, all the people that are listed there were people that quoted one another, and they're all coming from one specific point of view. And he never bothered, the author of the book never bothered to get out of that little closed garden that he was in. And so he was about as far from the truth as he could possibly be as a consequence of that.
He was in an echo chamber.
He was in an echo chamber. And had he even bothered to look at the encyclopedia, he could have avoided some of his errors. That is, he made fundamental factual mistakes. It wasn't just opinion that I was disagreeing with. He had factual errors.
And that's a huge difference. That I kind of missed a lot of what you were saying because my mom texted me something really important. But so I was talking to her.
She's not watching?
Oh. She doesn't know how. So I'll teach her how.
Yes, she'll have.
But no, it was something about her doctor stuff. But anyway, what was the last thing you said?
About doing research and
No.
being in an echo chamber or
No, keep going because I didn't hear any of that.
factual errors.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so a lot of what people disagree about are opinions.
True.
And I'm teaching opinion writing in third grade. It's amazing how much this applies to third grade. And I told them, I said, you will not find people duking it out in the parking lot over whether or not the sky is blue. You may find them duking it out in the parking lot over whether or not it's a nice day or if they're having a good day or whatever, because it's an opinion. And I said, and that's what people fail to recognize is that opinions are kind of by their very nature going to conflict and you're not going to necessarily agree. You can argue them for fun, but I mean, you can try and change somebody's opinion based on facts, but it's not worth all the contention. A lot of the opinion is, especially, I know this, I keep bringing it back to politics, but it's really people's opinions that everybody's freaking out over. And when the facts, nobody freaks out over I mean, I guess there's a couple facts people freak out over, but most of the time, it's opinions that people are.
Although ideally, opinion should
about.
be based on factual information.
One would think.
And this brings us back to the question thing, is that when somebody asks a question, sometimes there's an awful lot of stuff you got to unpack before you can actually get to their question, because there are all these presuppositions they have which may or may not be correct. You have to deal with first before you can get to this question. And of course, the question may be illegitimate altogether because of all these presuppositions that are messed up that you got to fix. And a lot of times that's a matter of the data that they don't have, facts that they don't have.
Well, and
or the lies that they believe instead of the truth.
We're going through that a lot right now politically with this border wall thing. And the facts themselves are actually in question. I was talking with my roommate last night, and we discovered that we actually had differing facts on things like criminal rates of immigrants, the rate of immigrant flow across the southern border, as opposed through legitimate ports of entry, the rate of illegal drugs coming across the southern border, as opposed to normal ports of entry and stuff like that. And the facts were we actually had we discovered that we had a dispute about the facts themselves,
Mhm.
and
But because those facts are influenced by bias. See, if my bias is that there's a lot of drugs coming across the border, and if your bias is that it's not, I will find facts that support my bias, and you'll find facts that support your bias. And the trick is to find what the actual numbers are and where those numbers come from.
yeah,
Yeah,
This is the
and that
thing
makes
that
it
the
tricky.
newspapers and media in general are poor at. You'll read about, some medical study that has indicated that, coffee is bad for you or chocolate is bad for you. And then you'll have other studies say coffee is good for you or chocolate is good for you.
ninjas are good for you.
Yeah, and so how do you find out? How do you determine what the truth is in that kind of a setting? Part of it is to try to find the original studies and see how many people were involved in the study, how long it was. That is the detailed study, so you know whether or not this is a legitimate study or not even. One of the difficult, and this is an important aspect of research, is you always want to try to find original source material. That is, get back to your raw data as much as you can. Don't rely on secondary sources. Try to find original sources. And that can be difficult sometimes. And that's why people don't bother to do it. They rely on secondary sources instead, or tertiary sources. And that's where you get this person putting this person puts this person, and you'll never find the original source. It's like those stupid memes that you'll see on Facebook, or they'll have a quote from somebody. Well, if the quote doesn't tell you when and where it came from, that should be your first clue that this may not be a legitimate quote. That is
Right.
Abraham Lincoln saying, "Watch out for what's on the internet."
Yeah, probably not.
Probably not valid, but that's the case for anything. You have to go back to original sources.
Right.
That's how
Especially
you
when
find
it's
the truth.
attributed to the year 2076.
Yeah.
Rick said, I think we moved to posturing. We moved from Hegelian dialogue to I'm right, you're wrong. Hard to come back from. Still more tragic. I'm afraid we moved to I'm right, you're evil. And I think that's very true. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question here.
Okay.
It's not a gotcha question. It's legit.
Fine.
I've heard the term, but I don't remember what it means. What is Hegelian dialogue? Besides
Hegelian
conversation. Oh, okay. Could be a typo.
Okay. That's thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Oh, talked about that because I was listening to that because I did listen to the 3D on the boxes we have. Is that you say something, you say a statement, I say a counter statement. It reminds me of Jane Curtin and Dan Aykroyd by counterpoint. You say a thing, I say an opposite thing, and then through our discussion, we come to a new thesis. That's synthesis, but then there's a new thesis. Yeah, see, I paid attention and I learned something.
Yeah, Hegel's the one.
Thank you to Beyond the Box, the original version.
Yes.
I don't know why I'm talking into my phone.
Well,
Thank you,
it's
Beyond the
fine.
Box.
But yeah, it's something that Hegel came up with, and it tends to be that way. When I was at UCLA, my graduate advisor talking about trends in scholarship. And one of the things that happened with Michael, his first name anyway, Dahoud is his last name. He did the commentary for the Anchor Bible Commentary series on the Book of Psalms. And he was the first major scholar to make use of the Ugaritic materials. Ugarit was a place that was uncovered in the 1920s by French excavation. And they found tens of thousands of tablets written in the Canaanite dialect. And it helped a lot with understanding Hebrew better because we have very limited corpus of stuff written in Hebrew. That is, the Hebrew Bible is pretty much all we have of ancient Hebrew. And so this illustrated a lot of things. And so Dahoud made use of that material when he did his commentary on Psalms. First time anybody had done that. The problem my professor told me was that he sometimes seemed to forget that he was dealing with a Hebrew text, not an Ugaritic text. And so he created a thesis. And then you have responses to Dahoud, which are the antithesis, which creates then a new synthesis. But you always, since Dahoud came out with this book in the 1960s, every commentary ever and any discussions of Psalms always have to reference Dahoud. He's unavoidable now because he was groundbreaking, but his was a new thesis. And then we've gotten a synthesis since then.
Okay.
Anyway,
In response to one of Rick's comments about evil, right, evil and wrong, right versus evil, I was commenting with my wife last night as we were driving home from Long Beach, and what was I going to say? Sorry, I do this too. My brain just kind of goes.
Yeah.
I'm discovering more and more as I get older that politics needs to be about policy rather than the battle between good and evil. Because the battle between good and evil means that you don't give ground. Because giving ground means that you're allowing more evil into the world.
right.
Whereas policy is about finding a way to make something happen that everybody can live with. And my wife and I were talking about this in the particular instance of abortion, which we personally are both against, but we were talking about ways that we could implement a policy that might be acceptable to a wider scope of the population while still moving in the direction that we thought it should move. And I see a lot of the Hegelian question in that as well. Is we come up with our needs, you come up with your needs, we kind of hammer out something that we can both live with, and we end up with a workable agreement. And when it comes to questions, I had and still have friends where we just agree to disagree on some things. I come in with my thoughts and my questions, and they come in with their thoughts and their questions, and we just go at it for a while, and we end up with something that we can both agree on. Usually there's a great deal of we agree to disagree on this, and that's fine. We're still friends and we still love each other, and that's as it should be. But we find that in asking our questions in such a way that we are looking for policy. We're looking for common ground. We're looking for the ways that we can meet each other halfway, almost. I guess you'd say.
All of life is not a football game or a baseball game.
Yeah,
it's not just your side wins, my side loses.
And so much of what we see today, I have a particular relative who, when it comes to politics, it's just, our side is the good side, their side is the evil side.
UCLA versus USC. Huh?
Yeah. And it's anything, any departure, any attempt to reach across the aisle is seen as a defection and is seen as, well, they're in the evil camp now.
Well, and there's
all of life is not good and evil.
Right, it's not all black and white. But even still, like, there's someone we've known for a very long time that, by the way, Tony's watching. It's our daughter.
Oh,
hi, Tony.
Hi, Tony.
We have a friend who we've known for a very long time who believes that if you're a Democrat, you cannot go to heaven. If you are, because I don't know if they check the voting registry at the pearly gates or what, but according to this person, if you're a Democrat, you can't go to heaven because all Democrats believe in abortion. There's an assumption right there that's inaccurate.
And that if you accept abortion, then that means you're automatically going to hell.
Even though the Bible does not mention that as
doesn't even mention
sin unto death. Yes, it's.
I've read it.
I don't think being a Democrat is a sin unto death.
I don't think so.
Anyway, but this person and I'll post to this person, you have to stop saying that because our job as Christians is to love people, regardless of their voter registration. And I will admit some are harder than others to love, but we have to love everybody regardless of how they vote and whether or not they believe in abortion or not, or whether or not they've had one. That's the hugest crime in this thing, I think, by both sides, is the demonization of these women who have had abortions, who need somebody to reach out to them and love them, because it is not just like having a tooth pulled. And
There's a lot more emotion.
it's a lot more.
It's very complicated.
Yeah, and that's what kills me. Like, I have a friend who years ago, they were pregnant with twins, and the one twin was a parasitic twin, and it was killing the other twin. He and his wife did not believe in abortion, but their doctor said the only way for the other twin to have a chance to survive was to reduce the pregnancy, basically abort the other twin. And they were just torn up over it. They lost sleep over it. And he prayed about it. I prayed about it. She prayed about it. And really the conclusion we came to was, if your two children were out in the yard and one had a knife and was stabbing the other one, you would do everything you could to save the child that was being attacked, even to the point of killing the other child. Hopefully it wouldn't come to that. But if that was your only option, that you would have to do that. And so that's the conclusion that we came to. And they ended up doing that. They had to travel really far to do it because it wasn't legal in the state where they lived. And they traveled really far to go do that. They had the other twin aborted, and it ended up destroying their marriage over time. I mean, their marriage wasn't real solid to begin with, so it probably, I mean, it may not have survived this anyway, because a lot of couples don't survive the death of a child or the loss of a pregnancy late in the term. But anyway, it was a very, very hard thing. And they actually thought, the doctors had said that the other baby would be probably absorbed into the system. Well, there were parts of that baby left when the other twin was born. So that was another whammy on them that made it very, very difficult. But they did not arrive at that conclusion easily. They really did a lot of soul searching. They reached out to wise people, their pastor, me, some other, I'm not saying I'm wise, but it was just another person that they felt confident would speak the truth to them. And they did that. And, is God going to hold them accountable for it? Who knows? Their intention, they wanted both children to live, but it was
a choice between one dying or both dying.
Right. And to save the other baby, and that other baby was born. She's healthy. We're not in like a lot of contact anymore.
There, we're back.
Okay, we're back.
Wonder how much we lost.
I don't know. Well, I noticed something flicked, but I was talking. So, let's see if I can get us going here again. Okay. Yeah, we're back live again.
Wonder how much of your story, where was it cut off at?
I don't know.
It's frustrating.
Let's see. Okay, there's two people watching. Oh, there's a comment. Hi, guys. Oh, Stephanie Patterson is there.
Oh.
Hey, Steph. Okay.
It'd be nice if we knew exactly where you were in your story when you
Yeah.
cut off. Somebody could inform us.
Yeah. Well, I don't see Rick or Tony there anymore, so let me see if I can invite them. There's a way to invite, but
Well, here it says invite friends.
okay. It cut off right where you were talking about the one baby being born healthy. Oh, okay. And then I had said, thank you, Stephanie. I had said, if maybe the other baby had died, like it was too far gone or something, and the other baby had died, would we still feel the same? Well, there's really no way to know. But in the end, it seemed like a good decision, because you always choose life, in my opinion anyway, you always choose life wherever you can. And to lose one life to save another, I believe is justifiable. So, but it was just a really unfortunate circumstance all around. And the little girl, to my knowledge, is healthy. So I'm not in a whole lot of contact with the family anymore. We're kind of friends that we see each other on Facebook, like, hi, bye. They're not on there much, but anyway.
I see a lot of parallels in the demonization of the other political party, be you Democrat or Republican. I see a lot of parallels in the demonization of that and the shutting down of honest inquiry in a classroom. In both cases, the honest seeker is rarely appreciated by their more, or maybe their less thoughtful peers. Because it's easy, picking sides and rooting for your team is easy. People do it every Sunday. Being able to say, well, we disagree on these 3 points, but on these other 4 points, we have some points of agreement. And on these other things, we actually fully agree. That's a lot harder. That takes a lot more thought. That takes a lot more investment of time and mental and emotional energy than it is to say, you good, or me good, you bad.
And I think it takes some maturity, too. To, I found where I can invite people, so I'll invite them back. It takes some maturity, too, to say, it's okay that we don't agree on this. We can still be friends. We can still hang out. Versus, oh, you believe that? Well, I'm not hanging out with you anymore. So, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, just bringing it back to, what we were talking about students not wanting to answer questions. And, now that I think about it, the people that tend to give thoughtful students a hard time in class tend to be the ones who look at politics like a football game. As they get older.
It's easy to do.
And really any issue. Like, if you don't agree with me, then, because I was kind of raised that way. Like, I had made the joke one time. I can say this now because my dad has passed away, so he won't be mad at me. But I made, I was born. Well, yes, I was born pre-trib and pre-mill. Didn't really know why I believed it, but that was what it was expected of me. And so somebody asked one time, what do you believe about the end times? And I said, well, I'm pan-trib and pan-mill. I figured I'll pan out in the end. And my dad was like, you better not. And I was like a full-grown adult when he said that. So I was like, what are you going to do? Not let me live in your house? I don't anymore. But it really upset him, so I knew that I wouldn't talk about that anymore. And I still really don't take a stand on it because it's just what I was taught was too complicated and I didn't understand it. And it's not that important to me to figure it out. And I think if we were supposed to know exactly what was going to happen, God would have written down in the Bible, okay, this is what happens first. This is what happens next, and it's not like that. So there you go. So that's my eschatology. I don't know. We'll figure it out when we get there.
Being able to say I don't know is a useful skill to develop.
But a lot of Christians don't like that.
I know. I don't understand why.
It's like, what do you believe about? Well, let's say eschatology, for example. I don't know what I believe about. Well, why not? Are you a bad Christian? They don't say it, but you can see it in their eyes.
What's funny about this is...
You should probably lean in a little bit because all I'm showing is your arm.
That's fine.
We need better...
Need better shot.
No, we just need a better setup. We'll get it eventually.
When you think about Christianity,
Oh, Dandy's on. Hi, Dandy.
Hi, Dandy.
And Rick came back.
Oh, Rick came back. When you think about it, for most of church history, people did not have access to the Bible at all.
That was a revelation for me when you preached on that. When, was it like the 1800s, you said?
No.
Oh.
Well, for most of human history,
right,
there is no Bible.
Right.
first bit of the Bible shows up when Moses goes up to Mount Sinai and comes back with the Ten Commandments.
Right,
the
and
first
that's
little
not
bit.
what I meant happened in the 1800s.
No, probably
I'm
not.
better at history than
Oh, that's good.
that. Printing press, that's what.
Yes, but it was the printing press that made the Bible ubiquitous, where everybody had it. Prior to that, nobody hardly had it. Most people had never read the Bible, had no way of getting a hold of the Bible, and yet somehow the church and Christianity survived.
Mm-hmm.
And so people feel guilty because they haven't read their Bible. You know, they started January 1st. I'm going to read through the Bible in a year. And of course,
January 2nd, they've already missed the day. They're done.
And of course, now it's February, and so yeah, nobody has been reading it now at all. They got to Leviticus, and that was the end of it.
Because that's right where I am right now. Although I did learn something from my reading through the Bible.
Yes.
That Ezekiel 38 through 40 is significantly different from Exodus 38 to 40. I think those are the chapters. I listened to it in the morning while I'm getting ready. I hit the book with the front. I'm like, why aren't they mentioning Moses anymore? What happened to the Israelites in the Promised Land?
Oh, yes.
Oh, guess what?
Yeah, and so not knowing is kind of the default. I mean, the whole reason we call this webcast A Mirror Darkly, it's based on what?
Rick says, Ruth, everyone knows Moses got the 10 Commandments in 1776. Sheesh. I know, I'm bad at history, Rick. I'm sorry. He's the history major, not me.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. It makes it more interesting that way. The reason we call this A Mirror Darkly is because it's from what Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, 9 and 12. In 13:9 he says, "For we know in part and we prophesy in part." And that's an important limitation to understand, is that we have very limited information. And then he goes on in verse 12 and says, "For we now see only a reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known." White's word in King James is, "For now we see through a glass or a mirror darkly." And that's the whole concept here. And that's an important concept to understand, is that what we know is incredibly limited. We only live for, so many years. We can only read a certain number of books and things over a lifetime. We only have a certain set of experiences. Our knowledge base is very limited. The more educated you are, the more you realize just how much you don't, how little you know, and how little you will ever know. So,
well, that's like kind of a really good conclusion to our.
yes, I think
And
it
I
is.
think-
And so that's the goal of the program, is to discuss things that we may not end up at the end of a program. Here's the answer. In fact, that would be weird if we did that. Instead, we're just, here are all the questions, here are the possibilities, and we want to try to avoid being jerks or being lazy about it, but still, that's...
So I have this question. I tried reading this book when I was younger, and it was just a little too weird for me, and I just couldn't get through it. Alice Through the Looking Glass. Would that have have you read it? Okay. I had a really hard time reading it, and
It's short. It's not very long.
it had nothing to do with the length. I think
I know,
it was
but it
the
is very-
concepts.
It is very odd. You
were
probably
really hard
enjoy
for
it
me.
more now.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Are there any correlations between Alice Through the Looking Glass and that verse?
Well, just in the
Not
sense
having
of
read it.
winding up in a place where she doesn't know what's going on and trying to figure it out. And of course, that's the nature of existence in general. That is, we are made powerfully aware of that fact if we ever visit a foreign country, where you suddenly find they do things that don't naturally do. Of course, occasionally you have really stupid people that go to other countries. Like when I went to Israel, that one of the people that came with us was really mad. We stopped in Switzerland on the way. He thought that it was just horrible that they wouldn't take his dollars. They had to convert them to Swiss francs instead. I'm thinking to myself, really? Really? You're that clueless? But some people really are.
Wow.
And some people, as they go through normal life, seem to be about that level of clarity.
When Paul talks about a mirror darkly, I think the historical understanding of a mirror is important.
Yeah.
They didn't have a glass with a silver coating on the back that reflected perfectly back what we got. they had bronze panels or discs that were mostly dent-free. It's impossible to get them perfectly dent-free in a pre-industrial society, really. Mostly dent-free, that were polished up really, really nicely. Or they had, the richer people had, like silver discs that they could polish up. But the best mirrors of the time were still incredibly
Loudly.
I was going to say obscuring.
Yeah.
Yes.
They would hide so much detail, and I think it's interesting that it hides the information about the person looking in it.
Mm-hmm.
That it was impossible to learn about yourself fully through this. You had to trust what you've been told about yourself, because you couldn't actually verify it yourself.
And it's interesting because there's that other verse in the Bible about the man who looks at himself in the mirror and then walks away
And
forgets what he saw. And conversely to that, by the way, that's what elementary school bathroom mirrors are like. It's just a polished piece of metal, because you can't have glass in elementary school bathroom. The teachers can. They sometimes trust us with sharp objects. And maybe that'll be a topic, is mirrors in the Bible. What was I going to say? If you ever buy one of those magnifying mirrors, yeah, I bought one of those, promptly got rid of it. Because large pores are so much bigger, flaws are so much more accentuated. I won't use really good lighting, because I like to live in a world where I think this looks okay.
Well, on that happy note, we're a little bit over an hour now.
Yes.
So we should probably end this particular week's broadcast.
So we're going to be back again next
We'll
week.
be back again next week at this place and time.
Okay.
So
Do you know what the topic is going to be?
I have not decided yet.
We could do mirrors.
Ninjas.
We'll find something.
Ninjas and mirrors. There you go. Join us next week, everybody, at 4:00 next Saturday for the topic of ninjas and mirrors.
How will we make this work?
That's Robin's question. How do we make this work? Thanks,
Okay,
everybody, for
thank
joining
you.
us.
Bye-bye.
Invite your friends next week.